Okay, so welcome to the second topic in the syllabus, that is basic introduction to diplomacy. Um, in this session, we will understand diplomacy in brief. So, diplomacy is nothing but it is a part and parcel of the international relation. Foreign policy comes into action only through diplomacy, which means it is an essential mechanism through which international relation functions. It serves as the primary channel for implementing a nation's foreign policy objectives and managing relationship between states. So before delving deep into the concept of diplomacy, we need to understand what is foreign policy. Foreign policy is is the comprehensive strategy a state develops to protect its interest abroad, while diplomacy provides the practical methods and techniques to execute these strategies through skilled communication, negotiation, and representation. So, in short, we can say that diplomacy is the tool through which foreign policy objectives are met. And what is foreign policy? Foreign policy is the sum total of objectives, goals, interest, and action taken by a state in relation to its external jurisdiction. Now, what happens is state participate in international relation or in international politics by making foreign policy. There are various kinds of policy. Um, Within a state, there are domestic policies that relates to the policies used by the state to run its internal affairs. Okay, so it is nothing but foreign policy is simply the business of the government. It is the business of the government and how they formulate and implement policies vis-a-vis their external environment. While interacting with other states, what will be the our position, what will be our principles, what will be the objectives of the state while interacting with other states within the international system. So that is known as the foreign policy. Foreign policy is the business of government, usually top political leaders who act as policy makers, whereas diplomacy provides the practical methods and techniques to execute these strategies through skilled personals or diplomats, skilled diplomats who have communication, negotiations, and representation skills and attributes. So, in short, diplomacy is the mechanism through which foreign policy objectives are met. Now, there is a relationship between foreign policy and diplomacy that we already discussed. So, let's see in brief. Foreign policy is the sum total of objectives, goals, interests, and actions taken by a state in relation to its external jurisdiction. It is formulated by top political leaders, cabinet ministers, parliament, and foreign ministry officials. Whereas diplomacy is the major instrument, one of the major instruments for executing the foreign policy. It is practiced by trained officials like ambassadors, envoys, consuls, who manage day-to-day international affairs to achieve foreign policy goals and objectives of their state. Okay, so maybe you can understand the differences. It is the Sum total of objectives, goals and interest and action taken by the state in relation to external jurisdiction, while this is the instrument to fulfill those objectives. Okay, and who are the actors while formulating the foreign policy? Top political leaders, the political leaders in the government, the opposition, they have a role to play, the cabinet ministers, the parliament, and foreign ministry officials, and even civil society. Whereas uh, diplomacy is conducted by trained officials, like ambassadors, envoys, consuls, who manage day-to-day international affairs to achieve foreign policy. Well, we could see the differences through the definition and the actors involved. There is certain degree of interdependence between these two concepts. Now, foreign policy represents the ends or substance. Okay, this is the final result that we are pursuing, while diplomacy provides the means or the method to reach the final results or the ends. Both are interdependent and interrelated in our complex contemporary world. So let's define diplomacy. In simple terms, it is the communication between governments. Diplomacy is the business of communicating between governments to achieve foreign policy objectives and fulfill national interest. So why diplomacy is conducted? To achieve the foreign policy objectives, and a key component of the foreign policy objective is to fulfill the national interest. In subsequent lectures, we will discuss in detail about national interest. National interest is nothing but the region, uh, the set of regions to fulfill the set of regions, the the behavior of the states to fulfill certain set of regions is determined by the national interest. For instance, it could be the survival of the state, the concept of sovereignty, territorial integrity. Those are the core national interest. um, Economic interest, socio-economic interest could be other set of national interest. Okay, we will discuss in subsequent lectures. The Oxford Dictionary defines diplomacy as the management of relations, international relations, by negotiations or through negotiations, the method by which these relations are adjusted and managed by ambassadors, envoys, and the business and the art of diplomat. So there are three parts to this definition by Oxford Dictionary. It is the management of relations by through negotiations and the method by which these relations are adjusted and managed by ambassadors and envoys, in short, or collectively known as diplomats, and it is the business or art of the diplomats. Now, there is a special definition by Sir Ernest Satow. The application of intelligence and tact to the conduct of official relation between the governments of the independent states. He defines diplomacy as the application of intelligence and tact to the conduct of official relations between the governments of independent states. So these are the definition that you could refer to for your exams. The nature and characteristics of diplomacy. Now, diplomacy depends upon communication. If two states are communicating with each other in a friendly manner, that is diplomacy. And if two states are not communicating with each other or they are communicating each other in a hostile manner, that also falls under the purview of diplomacy. Okay, so it is basically the communication channel. Diplomacy serves as the primary channel for communication between governments, facilitating dialogue and understanding. So what is the nature and characteristics? It offers a communication channel, or it serves as a communication channel. It involves bargaining process. Diplomacy involves bargaining process. It functions as a bargaining game that aims to achieve maximum benefits while giving minimum concessions. It requires tact, skills, intelligence, and wit. These are the characteristics of diplomats. A diplomat should be tactful, skillful, should be intelligent, and have a sense of humor as well. It is a versatile approach. It involves various approaches, implies both compromise and threat, persuasion, penalty, reward, and risk. So these are different tools or instrument within diplomacy. Diplomacy can be conducted by threatening other states or other actors. It could be conducted through persuasion or attraction, through penalty, its type of a threat, and through reward and punishment. The famous or the well-known adage of carrot and sticks. Carrot refers to reward and sticks refers to punishment. The proverbial carrot and stick approach, that is the reward and punishment. So it involves versatile approach. It is a professional, it involves professional expertise. The diplomacy is conducted by professionals. Okay. For successful and effective diplomacy, trained and professional diplomats are essential as they navigate the complex international situation in both war and peace. That's why expertise is required. The functions of diplomacy and diplomats. In general, if the questions ask you to write about the functions of diplomacy or the functions of diplomats, these are the points that could be included. Okay, the first function is representation. So before that, there is a framework or the treaty, the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relation. It is a framework that provides the outline for how a diplomatic relation should be conducted, and it is also an important document in international relation or international law and conduct of diplomacy. Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relation 1961 and Vienna Convention on Consular Relation 1963. The links to both the documents will be included in the video in the comment section or in the introductory sections of the video. Okay, you can download it from there. These two are important documents. So the Article 3 of the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relation mentions following functions of diplomats: to representing the sending state in the receiving state, and protecting the interest of the sending state and of the nationals in the receiving state within the limits permitted by international law, negotiating with the government of the receiving state. By the way, the sending state is the state the diplomat belongs to, and the receiving state is where he is posted. Okay, he or she is posted. So a diplomat represents his state in the receiving state or where he is posted. It could be a bilateral mission, it could be a multilateral mission, it could be a regional secretariat. So wherever he is posted, he or she is posted, protecting the interest of his state, the sending state, and of its nationals in the receiving state. That is the function of the diplomat within the limited limit by international law. And also, okay, so where were we? The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relation, Article 3 under the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relation lists out various functions of diplomat. The first is diplomat represents the sending state in the receiving state and protects the interest of the sending state and of its national in the receiving state within the limits permitted by international law. And the third function is negotiate with the government of the receiving state and ascertaining by all lawful means the conditions and development in the receiving state and reporting thereon to the government of the sending state. This basically means you gather intelligence, you gather information and report it back to the headquarters and promote friendly relations between the sending state and receiving state as well as developing economic, cultural and scientific relations. Now the phrase inter alia refers to there could be more additional functions apart from these listed functions. Okay, so the representation, information gathering, negotiation and protection of national interest and the interest of the citizen in the receiving state are the functions of diplomacy or diplomats. And the instrument and techniques or tools of diplomacy. So diplomacy is as ancient as civilization. Okay, the ancient strategies of Kautilya in the Eastern philosophy or in Eastern region. Kautilya in his Arthashastra outlined key instrument of diplomacy, key instrument that state could follow to interact or deal with other states. The first is Sam, Dam, Danda. Okay, so there are various strategies outlined by Kautilya in his seminal work Arthashastra. He outlines the state can use various instruments such as Sam, Dam, Danda, Ved while dealing with other states. Okay, by Sam he means through negotiation, by Dama means through concessions, by Danda means punishment, and Veda means division. Similarly, in ancient Indian text also referred techniques such as Sandhi, that is treaty. Asana is power consolidation. You preserve your power and you consolidate your power. Dwadibhav is dual role, which means there is friendship outside without expressing enmity. Yana is attack and Bigra is severing relations. So these are the ancient wisdoms that showcase how diplomacy could be conducted using following tactics or instruments. Now there are instruments of coercion usually in contemporary diplomacy that might involve communicating threats or applying pressure through formal protests, sanctions, embargoes, all while maintaining diplomatic ties. The coercion strategies could be applied, and that includes formal protests through diplomatic communications, diplomatic correspondence, uh, such as protest notes, okay, and demarches. And there are sanctions, economic sanctions, embargoes, all while maintaining the diplomatic ties without breaking the diplomatic ties. There could be instances, there could be instruments where state could use to apply threats or communicate threats or apply pressure to the their counterpart. The fourth category of instrument or techniques could be persuasion. This involves presenting well-reasoned argument and offering mutually beneficial arrangements to encourage other parties to adopt supportive stances. A good example or common example for persuasion could be the use of soft power and other public diplomacy initiatives. And there are adjustment and agreements techniques. Effective diplomacy necessitates compromise, with nations adapting their stances to achieve lasting agreements on shared interest and mutual advantage. So it should be the agreement should be a win-win situation for both the parties or the parties involved. Usually the agreements are finalized through negotiations, and if the negotiation does not include um, the stances or the positions of the parties involved, it is less likely to be um, finalized, and the agreement are less likely to be reached. So the interest of the involving parties should be both of the or all the involved parties should be kept or addressed to have a successful agreement. Now, classification of diplomatic personnels. In diplomacy, they are the actors or the implementing actors. I think during the first or the second slide we discussed about the actors who formulate the foreign policy, whereas these actors, they implement or they are the one who execute foreign policy through diplomacy. The Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations 1961 establishes a framework for diplomatic personnel, while Vienna Convention on Consular Relations 1963 codified consular functions, including visa processing and trade facilitation. Usually, the consular personnel generally enjoy fewer privileges and immunities than diplomatic personnel in the host nation, and you may compare both the conventions, both the frameworks, both the treaties, uh, to have a basic understanding of the privileges and immunities and the slight differences in the privileges and immunities enjoyed by the diplomatic personnel and consular personnel. So there are the different categorization or establishes the framework under which the diplomats could be classified includes there are head of the mission. Okay, the head of the mission types could be ambassadors, high commissioners, and envoys. The high commissioner is a term used if it is a term used for of ambassador of one Commonwealth country to another Commonwealth country. So there are around 50 countries under the British Crown, and if one country or the one state of the British Crown or the Commonwealth opens an embassy in another Commonwealth nation, their embassies are called High Commission, and the head of the missions are called High Commissioners instead of ambassadors. Okay, and there are special envoys for those who are assigned special duties for certain duration of time. Then there are senior diplomatic staff, minister counselors and counselors, and mid-level diplomats, the secretaries, the first secretaries, second secretaries, and third secretaries, and junior diplomatic staff, attaché and consular personnel, Then there are consular officers, consul generals, consuls, vice consuls. Okay, this is consul generals are the uh, head of consular missions. Okay, so this classification is apt only till number 4. Okay, 5 can be seen as a separate classification where the consul general is the head of the consular mission. There are two types of there are various types of diplomatic missions. Okay, we will discuss in the other topic, and I will try to correct this one, this slide. Okay, so for now, the consul general is the head of consular mission, and consuls and vice consuls are the mid-level, the senior and mid-level consular personals, respectively. Okay, so for now, only these should be referred regarding diplomatic personals. Now, evolution and type of diplomacy. Diplomacy has evolved from traditional practices, ancient to traditional practices, and from traditional to modern practices. There is a debate between old and new diplomacy. Old diplomacy, usually it was secretive, Europe focused diplomacy of 16th and 19th century, 16th to 19th century, and the new diplomacy has evolved and adopted more democratic and global approaches, and the timeline would be mostly after the World War One. There are secret and open diplomacy. It has evolved from a secretive profession to an open and transparent profession. For instance, during the Cold War, gathering secret intelligence operations was one of the core functions of diplomatic missions. It still remains valid, but there are a major chunk of transparent democratic governance practices within the contemporary diplomacy. Then there are economic and digital diplomacy. These are the new trends. The traditional diplomacy focused mostly on security and survival of the state, while the modern diplomacy, the modern approaches leverages on the economic interest and technological advancement, including artificial intelligence, virtual spaces, and digital communications. And there are bilateral versus multilateral diplomacy. Direct state-to-state relations versus conferences and institutional diplomacy through forums like UN and WTO. Bilateral diplomacy involves two states and their various aspects of relation, including political, economic, social, cultural, technological, so on and so forth. Whereas multilateral diplomacy is a common platform to discuss common challenges, and it is guided by shared values, principles, and institutions such as UN and WTO. Diplomacy has evolved significantly over time, adapting to the changing global conditions. From personal summit diplomacy of head of the state to the institutional framework of international organization, diplomatic methods continue to transform with technological advancement and shifting power dynamics. So it is evolving. Okay. So that's it for this topic, understanding diplomacy. There is not much in this syllabus. The syllabus asks you to have a basic understanding of diplomacy, and In subsequent lectures, we will follow other topics from the syllabus. So, good night for now.